Well, are we ready to rumble?
Let's do it.
All right. We got on the left our transgender Wiccan progressive. And on the right, we have our conservative Protestant political consultant cartoonist.
Scott, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do me one favor.
Sure.
When Donald starts, just go ahead and stop your video and then start it again so that Donald and I will be on this, on the same level as it were.
I'll do that. I will move my video out at this point. All right, Mr. Bush, you're up.
Yes,
welcome to everyone. My name is Donald Wilson Bush, and I am honored to be a part of this important debate. As we begin, I want to thank Reverend Janet Gollery McKeithen and Susan Longmiller and all the parishioners at church in Ocean Park for hosting this event, and to J. Scott Fuller for agreeing to moderate this debate. I also want to recognize Rachael Rose Luckey for her indefatigable spirit and straight up willingness to publicly engage with me in this important dialogue at a time when it seems that civilized debate is all but lost in this country. As things continue to unfold here, you will come to see that Rachael Rose is an extraordinary human being whom I have grown to love and to admire over the last 4 years for her brilliance and courage to make some of the hardest decisions you can ever make in any environment. And yet she has chosen to make them come what may. Now, for the record, I absolutely disagree with much of what she believes and most of what she has to say. And I strongly disagree with some of the irreversible decisions that she has made in her life. But the decision to debate me here today is not one of them. And I want to thank Rachael right here and now at the outset for simply being here with me on this Zoom stage and to acknowledge her strength of character and commitment to having a civil discourse. Thank you, Rachael. I am grateful to you for this opportunity to lock horns and to present my views in a safe and civil space without being canceled or labeled as a white supremacist or summarily dismissed as a toxic masculine presence as I have been in other venues. This debate is all the more important in today's world because it also seems that rational and reasonable argument are nearly as rare as civil discourse. In the famous line by Eddie Dane in the Coen brothers crime drama Miller's Crossing, "You're so smart, except you ain't. I get you, smart guy. I know what you are, straight as a corkscrew. Mr. Inside-Owski. Down is up, black is white. Well, I think you're only half as smart." And I'm not just casting aspersions on one side of this argument, I'm talking about both sides. No one that I have seen debating any of the current culture war issues on social media have explained where all this woke crazy actually started in order to give us some real context for building a plan to fix it. Everybody's screaming at each other and Donald Trump wants to hit somebody in the face. But all I can find is a bunch of clickbait without much real substance. For example, in the last 2 weeks, I've watched at least 30 debates and presentations on the internet about woke hot button issues like Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, gay pride parades, and cancel culture, dating all the way back to the gay marriage debate in 2013 when Doug Wilson confronted Andrew Sullivan, up through the campus confrontations between students and Professor Jordan Peterson in 2016, and then Ben Shapiro, who spent 2 hours on Joe Rogan's podcast in 2018 discussing the unfolding transgender controversies in women's sports. All of this without ever getting down to the root of the problem. During his podcast, Joe asked Ben 2 big questions that every educated person in the entire country has been asking. How did we get here, Joe asked. How did we get so far down this rabbit hole? But Ben never answered. He got close several times, but he never fully developed an answer or an explanation of what really started this crazy woke slide down the slippery slope into an absurd space where we are today with one Democrat governor having just signed a bill to teach 2nd and 3rd grade kids last week how to question their biologically natural gender assignment as part of the approved curriculum. A run of Democrat state and local elected officials who have already signed state ordinances and state legislative to create a 3rd gender option, gender X, for so-called non-binary, transgender, and gender non-conforming adults and children, to present on all manner of government documentation, including government-issued birth certificates. While on the other side, you have Republican leaders in more conservative states passing don't say gay bills and legislators voting to ban school counselors from recommending hormone treatment for adolescent minors with gender dysphoria without giving parental notification and without getting parental consent. Even when we had the relatively unrestricted format of a 2 to 3 hour interview with Joe Rogan to show us the roots of what this woke crazy really is, Ben Shapiro still resorted to conservative clickbait with one-liners and personal attacks on former Olympian decathlon gold medalist Caitlyn Jenner, Laura Hubbard, a transgender weightlifter born with male chromosomes competing against women in the 2021 Summer Olympics, and Fallon Fox, a women's champion MMA fighter who never felt morally obligated to disclose the fact that she was born a biological male before she began brutally beating her biologically born female opponents. It will be interesting what all the clickbait YouTubers make out of this morning's news feed. Did any of you see the recent Fox News headline? It just came out today. New Jersey inmates at women's prison pregnant after sex with another incarcerated person. You can't make this stuff up, so I won't say any more. I concluded that these famous YouTube podcasters and elite media personalities to whom we look for serious answers to the important issues are only really interested in two things: views and clicks. Views and clicks. All they want is views and clicks. That's why they focus all their talking points on where we are right now, down inside the rabbit hole. And unlike what I just did by moving on from the subject of breaking news, they just keep hammering their dialogue with gossip, sexual content, and salacious innuendo, and focus on who's doing what to whom, like Maury Povich and Jerry Springer do. Then their polarized supporters all hit the like and subscriber buttons at the bottom of their YouTube computer screens. Unfortunately, digging to the root cause of all this woke cancel culture crazy takes some real effort, and some people might even consider it to be boring. But I'm not going to let that stop me from trying. And I'm not going to do this just because I want you to hit the like button. In fact, I don't even care if you subscribe to this channel or not. What I want you to do is to focus your attention and to engage with the facts of what I'm presenting here today, because this is not clickbait. Far from it. Forget about the fruits. I want you to look at the roots with me to see how this crazy woke cancel culture tree grew up so big in the first place. And then I want to demonstrate without any doubt how the LGBTQ agenda is causing it to grow bigger and bigger. You can disagree with my argument and you can question my conclusions, but you cannot deny the facts. As far as I'm concerned, understanding how we got here by looking at the facts is the only way to figure out how we can reverse the current trajectory into the possible demise and ultimate destruction of Christian culture in America in order to save the Western civic tradition of freedom and democracy that Christian people built. Not Muslims, not Buddhists, not Zoroastrians, not Jews, not atheists, not Native Americans or Aboriginal pagan earth spiritualists, and not Wiccans, but Christians. Christians built the Western civic tradition that has transformed the world with democracy, freedom, justice, prosperity, and security, and made it available to people from all other faith perspectives. Sadly, the current generation of institutional leaders, especially an increasing number of Gen X and millennial church leaders, are more interested in being liked and appreciated than they are in holding others accountable to the truth of Scripture, natural law, and even science. Because these woke church leaders have abdicated their responsibility to pass on what they have received from those that went before us, social constructionists since the 1970s and the deconstructionists since the 1990s have been free to spin a utopian narrative of pure hogwash without any real pushback in many of our churches. And through most channels of the legacy mainstream media, in conjunction with the explosion of the social media, the resurgence of Marxist ideology is back in full force with all its destructive power aimed directly at the foundations of our great democracy. Boomers bought into it first, and then their children, the millennials, they bought into it second. And now finally, Gen Xers like me, who are kind of late to the party, are slowly starting to drink the Kool-Aid. Billy Graham's beloved Wheaton College has gone woke. Rob Bell went woke a long time ago. My good seminary friend, Fred Harrell, and former colleague in Reformed University Ministries, has gone woke. And he took his whole San Francisco City Church down the woke rabbit hole with him. And even my oldest daughter's congregational community church in rural South Central Virginia is struggling with the LGBTQ woke cancer. Therefore, it is my contention that the LGBTQ agenda is nothing more than the latest manifestation and an organized extension of the socialist workers' revolution that began at the turn of the 20th century and ultimately took root in American universities in the mid to late 1960s as critical theory, feminist theory, and a host of other maladjustments to the academic curriculum meant to appeal to self-described oppressed minorities who wouldn't pay the tuition if they didn't find their own story of oppression represented in the curriculum. As my Armenian wife says, Donnie John, it's all about money and new members. And I believe she's right. Universities will change their curriculum to anything that will get people in the door with their pocketbooks in hand. And it looks like more and more evangelical Bible-believing churches are starting to do the same thing. It's not about ministering to broken people who are legitimately suffering from gender dysphoria. It's not about that anymore. It's all about getting money and new members. In his book, The Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race, and Identity, British author Douglas Murray calls the political aspect of this push for money and power the Marxist Foundation. The Marxist Foundation. This is the same Marxist foundation that we saw labor activists attempting to build their political house on 60 or 70 years ago. Apparently, it is still solidly in place, and the activists, not unlike my worthy opponent, Rachael Rose Luckey, seek to transform American culture into something new and beautiful by their own definition, by subverting, poisoning, and infecting conservative institutions built by my Western Christian European forebears that support our bourgeois world of capitalist-driven prosperity, ambitions, liberty, and free enterprise. Like slow dripping water, or like the proverbial frog in the kettle, these radicals, like yourself, Rachel, as nice as you are, you've been patiently infecting the American culture one community at a time, one family at a time, one classroom at a time, one vulnerable kid at a time, with cancerous Dionysian intent, like termites eating away at the foundations of a great house. As Murray points out in his book, this is merely an extension of the same old Marxist agenda that failed in other times and places, but still seeks, at least in theory, to bring down the patriarchy, or in other words, to level the economic playing field by homogenizing everyone into one large global drone society devoid of ambition, social status, and hierarchical distinction. I say at least in theory, because as history has proven, in practice, Marxism has only served to reinforce hierarchies of social order where violence and injustice prevail, even among farm animals, where the pigs are at the top wearing long pants, walking upright, and sleeping in the farmer's big house, while all the other farm animals still walk on all fours and sleep in the barn. As such, the LGBTQ agenda is part of this ongoing Marxist political cancer that started in the fertile soil of democratic freedom, created and sustained by Christian love, philanthropy, theology, and social cohesion, grounded in a widely shared, albeit evolving, grand narrative about how the universe works that was set in motion during the Christian European Renaissance and Reformation 6 centuries ago. But with the advent of identity politics in the last quarter century, this LGBTQ woke neo-Marxist agenda has quickly grown into a cancerous tree that is bearing enough addictive fruit capable of poisoning an entire generation of relatively uneducated consumers suspended in a perpetual state of adolescence who know the price of everything, but understand the value of nothing. So over the course of the remaining time that I have left, allow me to explain where all this cancer came from. And in my concluding remarks, I will leave you with two things to take away from this argument that prove my point in this debate. Namely, the LGBTQ agenda is poisoning Western civilization. So first, where did this LGBTQ cancer come from? In short, Europe in the late 18th and early 19th century. But the long answer is, at roughly the same time in the late 18th and early 19th century, three European philosophers, Immanuel Kant in Germany, Jean-Jacques Rousseau in France, and David Hume in Scotland, called into question any possibility of attaining absolute certainty about anything. It was at this point that Christian leaders in the church began to doubt the accuracy of the Bible, scientific explanations about the world, and the existence of absolute truth in general. This is what caused the woke rabbit hole to open up in the first place. In his books, Kant concluded that our knowledge is based on sensory perception, and we cannot touch, taste, smell, hear, or really and truly feel God, the inner self, or the real essence of anything we encounter in the natural world. In other words,
Mr.
God's
Wilson, your time has expired. So we've reached the 15-minute opening remark portion of your time.